I was halfway through dinner when my phone started vibrating nonstop. Missed call after missed call. By the time it hit 79 calls, I knew something had broken. What my parents didn't know was this. The house they planned to take from me had already taught me how to survive betrayal. And this time, I wasn't going to beg. Ayana thought the message was harmless. Her mother said the family needed to talk, nothing serious, just a small discussion. When Ayana arrived, everyone was already seated, calm and smiling. The room felt quiet, but not peaceful. The smiles were stiff, like they had been practiced in advance. Her father spoke first, using a soft voice, the kind people use when they think they are being reasonable. He said they were proud of her, proud of how far she had come, proud of the house she worked so hard to buy. Ayana relaxed for a moment, thinking maybe this was just praise. Then the tone changed. Her mother leaned forward and said Zuri and her whole family were going through a difficult time. She said family should help family. Before Ayana could even ask what that meant, her father smiled again and said they had already decided something. Zuri's entire family would move into Ayana's house. Not for a short stay. Not until things improved. Just move in. Rent-free. No end date. No discussion. It was said so casually, like they were talking about borrowing a chair or staying for the weekend. Ayana sat there in shock. That house was not a gift. It was not inherited. It was not shared property. It was the result of years of sacrifice, long nights and lonely days. Yet the way they spoke, it sounded like the house already belonged to the family, and Ayana was just a caretaker. When she tried to speak, her mother raised a hand and said, "This is what good daughters do." Her father added that Zuri had children, responsibilities and needs. Ayana was strong and could handle it. No one asked if she was comfortable. No one asked where she would live. No one mentioned how long this arrangement would last. They spoke as if refusing was not an option. They didn't call it taking. They didn't call it forcing. They called it duty. They wrapped the demand in soft words like love, sacrifice, and family values, hoping it would sound kind instead of cruel. Ayana looked around the room and realized this was not a request. It was a decision already made without her. They weren't asking for permission. They were informing her of her role. In that moment, she understood something painful and clear. To them, her success was not hers. It was something they felt entitled to use. And the calm smiles were not love. They were confidence. Confidence that she would obey, like she always had. Ayana slowly turned her eyes toward Zuri, waiting for her to speak. Even one sentence would have changed everything. A simple "Are you okay with this? Or we can find another way." But Zuri said nothing. She kept her head down, staring at her hands like they were the most interesting thing in the room. Her fingers twisted together, calm and patient, as if she already knew how this would end. She did not look surprised. She did not look ashamed. She looked comfortable. The silence stretched. Ayana felt it pressing against her chest. Zuri still did not raise her eyes. She did not defend Ayana's right to her own home. She did not say no to the plan either. She let their parents do the talking, let them explain, let them justify. And in that quiet, Ayana understood something painful. This was not a sudden idea. This was not a desperate last option. This was something Zuri had accepted long before this meeting even happened. Ayana remembered all the times Zuri complained about space, money, and stress. All the moments she hinted at needing help, but never directly asked. Zuri never begged. She never explained. She simply waited, knowing someone else would speak for her. Knowing Ayana was always the one expected to give. That was the part that hurt the most. Zuri didn't fight for the house because she didn't have to. Silence was enough. Silence meant agreement. Ayana realized that if Zuri truly felt uncomfortable, she would have spoken up. She would have said the house was too much to ask for. She would have worried about Ayana's life being turned upside down. But Zuri stayed quiet because the plan worked in her favor. She let kindness look like weakness. She let family love look like permission. She didn't steal the house with words. She took it by not refusing. The room felt heavy. Ayana's parents kept talking, but their voices faded into the background. All Ayana could focus on was Zuri's silence. It was louder than shouting, louder than arguments, louder than blame. That silence said, "I deserve this." It said, "You'll survive." It said, "This is your role." Ayana felt something shift inside her. She stopped seeing Zuri as someone trapped by circumstances. She saw her as someone protected by expectations placed on others. This wasn't about need anymore. It was about entitlement wrapped in family language. Zuri didn't ask because she believed she didn't have to. She believed Ayana would always make room, always adjust, always disappear a little more. In that moment, Ayana understood the truth clearly. The betrayal wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, polite, and confident. And somehow, that made it hurt even more. As Ayana sat there, memories began to rush through her mind, one after another, clear and heavy. This moment did not come out of nowhere. It was built slowly over many years. From the time she was young, Ayana was always told the same thing. You can handle it. When things went wrong in the family, they came to her. When someone needed help, they looked at her. When there was pressure, it was placed on her shoulders. She learned early that being strong meant being silent. She remembered giving up her plans so others could be comfortable. She remembered being asked to wait, to understand, to adjust. If Zuri needed something, Ayana was expected to step back. If her parents were stressed, Ayana was told not to add to their worries. Her feelings were always pushed aside because she was mature and responsible. Those words sounded like praise, but they were actually instructions. They taught her to ignore herself. Every sacrifice was treated as normal. No one thanked her for giving up her time, her money, or her peace. It was simply expected. When she worked late nights, they said she was capable. When she carried emotional pain alone, they said she was strong. When she stayed quiet, they said she was wise. Slowly, Ayana learned that love in her family came with conditions. Love meant giving without limits. The house she bought was not just a building. It was proof that she had survived all of that. It was the first thing that truly belonged to her. Yet even that was being claimed. And in that moment, Ayana saw the pattern clearly. This demand was not sudden or shocking to them, because it followed the same rule she had lived under her whole life. They believed she would say yes because she always had. They believed she would adjust because that was her role. But something felt different this time. As the memories piled up, a quiet pressure built inside her chest. It was not anger at first. It was exhaustion. A deep, heavy tiredness from always being the one who carried everything. For the first time, she did not feel proud of being strong. She felt used. Ayana realized that "you can handle it" had never been about her ability. It was about their comfort. It was a way to avoid responsibility and place it on her. And suddenly, that understanding hurt more than the request itself. She felt a sharp clarity cut through years of confusion. She had been trained to sacrifice, not respected for it. In that moment, something snapped inside her. Not loudly. Not with tears or shouting. It was quiet but final. The part of her that always adjusted stepped back. The part of her that always absorbed pain went silent. And for the first time in her life, Ayana stopped preparing herself to handle it. Ayana did not raise her voice. She did not argue or defend herself. She did not list reasons or explain her pain. She simply looked up and said four calm words, "Let me think about it." The room changed instantly. Her parents stopped smiling. Zuri finally looked up, her eyes wide for a second before she looked away again. That single sentence did more than shouting ever could. It broke the script. They were following. They had expected resistance or tears, maybe even anger. They were prepared to talk her down, to remind her of family duty, to wear her out. But calm was something they did not expect. Calm meant uncertainty. Calm meant she was not agreeing. And that scared them. The conversation ended quickly after that, polite on the surface, tense underneath. Ayana went home, thinking she had bought herself time. She did not know panic had already started spreading behind her back. Within hours, her phone lit up. At first, the messages sounded caring. "We just want what's best for everyone. You know, family should stick together." Then the words began to change. The messages became shorter, sharper, more demanding. Her mother reminded her of everything they had done for her growing up. Her father warned her not to be selfish. Love slowly turned into a list of debts she was expected to pay. When Ayana did not reply right away, the pressure increased. Messages came faster. Her sister sent a long text about stress and suffering, without once asking how Ayana felt. Then came the guilt. "If something happens, it will be on your conscience." Zuri's children are counting on you. Each message felt less like love and more like a warning. Soon messages were not enough. The calls started, one after another. Not to ask how she was doing. Not to check if she was okay. They called to make sure she did not forget her role. They called to remind her that thinking too long was dangerous. They called because silence meant control was slipping. Ayana sat quietly, watching the phone vibrate again and again. She noticed something important. No one asked what she needed. No one asked if she had a plan. No one cared where she would go if her house was taken. All they wanted was an answer that benefited them. That was when she understood the truth clearly. Their fear was not about family falling apart. Their fear was about losing access. The calm "let me think" had exposed everything. It showed how quickly care turned into pressure. How easily love became a transaction. How fast support changed into control. Ayana did not feel guilty anymore. She felt awake. And as the calls kept coming, one thing became clear to her. If 4 quiet words could cause this much panic, then her silence was more powerful than she ever imagined. That night, Ayana placed her phone on the table and tried to breathe. She told herself she would check it later, just once, and then sleep. But the screen kept lighting up. Again and again. Missed call after missed call. The number kept rising until it stopped at 79. One night, one phone. 79 calls. Not because something bad had happened. Not because they were worried about her safety. But because she had not given the answer they wanted. Ayana finally sat down and listened to the voicemails. The first few sounded polite, almost kind. Her mother said they were worried and just wanted to talk. Her father said she should not overthink things. But as the messages continued, the tone changed. The voices became sharp and impatient. The words carried blame instead of care. They told her she was causing stress. They told her she was being unfair. They told her she was breaking the family apart. Some messages were rushed, filled with urgency, as if time was running out. Others were quiet but heavy, filled with warnings hidden behind calm words. Don't make us look bad. People are already asking questions. This is not how family behaves. Each message felt like a push, forcing her closer to the edge. It was not about talking anymore. It was about control. Ayana noticed something that made her chest feel tight. Not one message asked how she felt. Not one person asked if she was scared or confused. No one asked where she would live if the house was taken. No one wondered how she would start over. Her life, her comfort, her future were invisible in every single voicemail. All they talked about was what they wanted and what they were losing. As she listened, a strange calm settled over her. The truth was becoming clear. If this was love, it was very conditional. If this was concern, it only existed when she did what they wanted. The 79 calls were not about family falling apart. They were about power slipping away. They were afraid because for the first time, Ayana was not responding the way she always had. She replayed one message again, where her father said she was being selfish. The word used to hurt her deeply. That night, it did not. Instead, it sounded empty. Because she finally understood something important. Wanting control over her own life was not selfish. Expecting her to disappear for others was. Ayana placed the phone face down. The room was quiet again. But this silence felt different. It felt honest. The 79 calls had done something they never intended. They exposed the truth clearly. She was never loved for who she was. She was valued for what she could give. And once she saw that, she knew she could never unsee it again. Ayana woke up the next morning with a clear mind. She did not call anyone. She did not argue. She did not beg for understanding. She simply knew what had to be done. While her family thought she was thinking, hesitating, or preparing to agree, she was already moving. Slowly, carefully, quietly, she began taking control of her own life. She started with the house. She changed the locks without telling anyone. Not a word. No explanations. Each click of the new keys felt like taking back a small piece of herself that had been given away too many times before. Then she checked the documents, papers that were always accessible to her parents in the past. She updated everything, legal addresses, permissions, security settings. Every little step was a shield against the people who believed they could decide her life for her. As she worked, she felt a strange calm, almost like breathing underwater after holding her breath. Too long. For years, she had adjusted to everyone's demands. She had sacrificed her time, energy, and emotions without ever saying no. But this time she was not negotiating. She was protecting herself. She was not arguing for fairness. She was quietly claiming it. The family, of course, did not notice immediately. They assumed her silence meant she was thinking, reconsidering, preparing to say yes. They thought time would wear her down, that eventually she would give in like she always had. They believed their love, their guilt trips, their urgent calls, would be enough to bend her. But Ayana had learned that the world does not bend to threats or manipulation. She had learned that calm and preparation could do what shouting never could. By the time they realized what had changed, it was too late. The locks had been replaced. The documents were updated. Ayana had already stepped back emotionally. She no longer reacted to their messages with worry or explanations. Their words, once able to control her, now fell into empty space. She had created a distance that was invisible yet unbreakable. Ayana watched from a quiet corner, unseen but fully aware. The family's expectation of compliance, their belief that they could wear her down, did not reach her anymore. They had planned to take her home, but she had quietly taken herself instead. No fight, no confrontación, just action. And in that quiet, unnoticed move, she finally felt power. Not the power of anger, or revenge, or yelling, but the power of protecting herself. For the first time, Ayana understood something profound. Change does not need noise to be noticed. Sometimes the quietest decisions are the loudest. And this time, she was not bending. Days passed quietly after Ayana's silent move, but in her family's world, nothing went as they expected. They still assumed she would give in, that time and pressure would bend her like always. But slowly, without a single argument from Ayana, their carefully planned takeover began to crumble. Zuri and her family tried to move in, expecting the house to be ready, expecting Ayana to step aside, but reality had other plans. Locks had been changed. Paperwork had been updated. The house that was supposed to be given to them was no longer accessible. Zuri looked confused, unable to understand how something so simple had stopped her from getting what she wanted. The family's parents called and messaged frantically, reminding Ayana of promises she had supposedly made. They claimed agreements had been spoken, that family duty demanded compliance. But Ayana had prepared silently for everything. She had anticipated every loophole, every excuse, every guilt trip, and when they tried to enforce their plan, they ran into boundaries they had never thought about. Legal documents, ownership papers, and clear rules stood in the way like walls. Their assumptions, built on her past obedience, no longer worked. The pressure, which had once been directed at her, began to flip. Calls, texts, and messages that were once demanding now carried confusion, frustration, and panic. They were no longer in control. Suddenly, Ayana's calm presence and quiet decisions had turned the situation upside down. Every expectation they had, every family duty they had tried to enforce, crashed against the reality she had created. They had underestimated her, assumed she would bend, and now they were scrambling. Zuri, who had relied on silence to get what she wanted, found herself helpless. The plan she had expected to succeed with little effort now collapsed around her. Promises that sounded certain fell apart. The house, the discussions, the pressure. They all failed because they had not accounted for Ayana thinking for herself, acting quietly, and stepping outside their control. Ayana watched the chaos unfold from her quiet corner, feeling a calm she had never felt before. She did not need to fight, yell, or punish anyone. She had not even confronted them directly. The universe, or karma, as some might call it, had done what her silence and preparation made possible. The people who had assumed power over her were now facing the consequences of their entitlement. Without any dramatics, without raising her voice, Ayana had shifted the balance completely. For the first time, she realized that sometimes justice arrives quietly, without warning, and does not need to be loud. It only needs preparation, patience, and the courage to stand firm. In that moment, she felt a sense of satisfaction that was deeper than revenge. The house was safe, her peace intact, and the lesson had been delivered, not with anger, but with quiet, unstoppable reality. That a few days after the silent shift, Ayana's phone rang again. She picked it up, but something was different. The voice on the other side was not sharp, not demanding. It was quiet, hesitant, even unsure. Her mother's tone had lost its usual confidence. Her father's voice wavered. The same people who had sent 79 messages in a single night, who had called her selfish and stubborn, were now speaking carefully, almost cautiously. They were no longer in control. They sounded confused, afraid, and unsure of what to say next. They asked questions instead of giving orders. "Can we talk?" her mother said softly. "We want to understand," her father added. There was no blame, no accusations, no urgency dripping through the words. They were feeling their first taste of uncertainty, and it was obvious. Every word trembled with hesitation. Their certainty that Ayana would bend, that she would make room for Zuri and follow their plan without question, had evaporated. Ayana sat quietly, holding the phone. She could feel the shift in power, almost like a physical weight lifting off her shoulders. For years, she had been the one to give in, to adjust, to absorb. And now, for the first time, the tables had turned. The voices that once demanded obedience were asking for patience, seeking permission, and hoping she would engage. They were learning, painfully, what it felt like to lose control over someone they thought they had shaped. Her heart stayed calm, but her mind was sharp. She knew this was the moment to assert her boundaries clearly, to show them that the old Ayana, the one who gave without thought, who sacrificed without question, was gone. She chose to answer, but only once. She did not need to argue. She did not need to explain. One conversation, measured and deliberate, was enough to set the tone. She spoke calmly, firmly, and without apology. Every word was a reminder that she was no longer available to be controlled, to be pushed, or to be manipulated. The family, listening to her for the first time on equal ground, could feel the difference. They realized that negotiation had limits, that their assumptions about her were wrong. For the first time, they had to consider Ayana's feelings, her rules, and her boundaries. Confusion and fear replaced their previous confidence. Their calls, once weapons to force her into compliance, were now attempts to reconnect, to reason, and to salvage what they had assumed they owned. When the call ended, Ayana placed the phone down. She had answered only once, and that was all she needed. No more calls, no more arguments. The tone had shifted forever. They had learned, finally, that the old ways would not work. Ayana's silence and calm had rewritten the rules, and this time she held the power. Ayana sat in her living room, the quiet settling around her like a protective blanket. The calls had stopped for now. The messages had slowed, and she felt a sense of clarity she had never experienced before. She thought about what she had endured. Years of being expected to sacrifice, adjust, and absorb everyone's needs while her own were ignored. She realized that she had reached a line she would never cross again. When her parents tried to negotiate one last time, Ayana did not argue. She did not plead. She did not cry. She did not feel the need to punish them for the pain they had caused, because punishment would have only dragged her back into the old cycle. And she did not feel the need to rescue them either, to fix their mistakes, to save their pride or calm their panic. That was not her responsibility anymore. She had learned that her value was not measured by how much she gave, but by how firmly she could protect herself. Instead, she spoke clearly and calmly. She laid down her terms, simple, direct, and non-negotiable. She told them what she would allow, what she would not, and what her boundaries were from that moment onward. She did not raise her voice. She did not explain her past sacrifices. She did not apologize for wanting her life to belong to her. Every word was precise, deliberate, and unshakable. She spoke not out of anger, but out of certainty. Her family listened, slowly realizing that this was different. This was not a temporary rebellion, a test, or a moment of frustration. For the first time, her parents and Zuri understood the reality. The old Ayana, the one who always adjusted, who always said yes, who always forgave and absorbed, was gone. This new Ayana was permanent. She had learned to protect herself without guilt, to take control without aggression, and to live without seeking permission. The realization hit them like a wave. Their attempts to manipulate, to pressure, and to convince her had failed not because of force, but because Ayana had quietly rewritten the rules of what was acceptable in her life. The room felt heavy with their silence. For years, they had counted on her compliance. They had relied on her sacrifices. And now, that reliability was gone. There was no rebellion to fight. There was no anger to calm. There was only clarity. Ayana's boundaries were firm, her decisions final, and her voice steady. In that moment, everything changed. Ayana did not need to argue, explain, or justify herself. The line she refused to cross was no longer negotiable. Her family understood, at last, that she would no longer be the version of herself they had controlled for years. The old Ayana was gone, and this time, she was not coming back. Ayana sat alone in her living room, the quiet stretching around her like a soft curtain. The house was hers again, completely and truly hers, but she did not feel like celebrating. There was no need for gloating, no urge to send a message or prove a point. She simply breathed, letting the calm sink into her bones for the first time in years. Every wall, every corner of the home, felt like a witness to what she had endured, and what she had finally reclaimed. Across town, Zuri realized the weight of silence. She had relied on quiet, on letting others make space for her, on expecting Ayana to always give in. But Ayana had stayed silent in a different way, calm, decisive, unshakable. And that silence had consequences. Zuri learned, too late, that doing nothing could backfire. She had expected the house, the obedience, and the easy path. Instead, she faced a reality where her comfort no longer came at Ayana's expense. Ayana's parents were learning something painful in their own way. Control, they discovered, was not infinite. Years of shaping her, pushing her, demanding her compliance. They all assumed it would last forever. But it had an expiration date. Their power had disappeared quietly, without drama, without force, leaving only the truth. Their influence ended where Ayana decided it would. Their calls, their messages, their manipulation. All that noise could not override a single person's boundaries when they were claimed firmly. As Ayana sat in her calm home, she realized something deeper. This was not just victory. It was not about revenge or punishing anyone. It was about peace. For years, she had measured her worth by obedience, her strength by sacrifice, and her love by how much she could give. But now she understood. Peace was louder than any phone ringing 79 times, louder than guilt, louder than the constant demands of those who thought they owned her life. Peace did not need to shout. Peace did not need to justify itself. Peace simply existed, solid and unshakable. Ayana leaned back in her chair and let her eyes close. She did not need to celebrate. She did not need to explain. She did not need to check if they understood. She had lived through betrayal, manipulation, and silence. And she had survived. And in that quiet moment, she knew something irreversible. Nothing could take this from her again. Her calm, her boundaries, her life, all of it belonged to her. And just like that, with no drama, no screams, no battles, the story ended. Not with revenge, not with chaos, but with a quiet truth. Peace is louder than 79 calls. That if this story touched you, don't stay silent. Like this video to support people choosing peace. Subscribe for more real stories that expose hidden family truths. And comment one word: peace. If you believe silence can be stronger than control.